Now, if we're being frank and we distill what our companies are trying to do, what we're trying to do as marketers, whether it's change people's perception of our company's price, get them to switch from a competitor brand, buy more of our products, all of these questions are ones of behavior change. And we're literally, as marketers, in the business of behavior change. So why wouldn't you draw on 130 years of studies into what makes for effective behavior change?
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Richard Shotton. If you don't know who Richard is, he is the author of a couple of books, The Choice Factory and The Illusion of Choice. He's also the founder of Astrotin, a consultancy that helps marketers use behavioral science to improve their results. And his podcast is Behavioral Science for Brands. And his course is Applied Behavioral Science. Richard, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very good. Good to see you.
I'm super excited to have you here today. Richard and I are going to explore how to put applied behavioral science to work in marketing. Now, before we go there, I'd love to hear your backstory. Like, how'd you get into all this, and how'd you get into behavioral science?
Good question. Normally, with things in life that you become passionate about, it's just a gradual drift. But for me, there was a very specific moment when I became interested in behavioral science and then the applications. I had a client, the British Health Service, and the campaign we were working on was Give Blood. So in Britain, the setup is we ask citizens to volunteer to give blood. And when this campaign was happening, it was about 2004, I happened to have read, do you remember The Tipping Point, the Malcolm Gladwell book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just finishing that. And at the back of that book, he mentions in passing a set of psychological studies by Latané and Darley. And these studies are into what he called the bystander effect, which is essentially, if you ask lots of people to help, lots of people to come to your aid, there is a diffusion of responsibility and everyone leaves it up to someone else. So I read about this study and thought, gosh, this is exactly the problem we're facing. We're going out and asking all Brits to donate blood. And just as Latané and Darley suggest, most people leave it up to others, their neighbours. So reading the study, I went and spoke to the creative agency, told them about this problem and said, well, why don't we change our creative, stop saying blood stock's low in England, please donate. Why don't we change it, create more of a sense of personal responsibility and tailor it a bit more tightly? So let's start saying blood stocks are low in London or Birmingham or Basildon. Just a little bit, very crude, but little change to the creative. And when we did that, a couple of weeks later, we got the results back and there was this 10 or 15% improvement in response rates. To me, that was a revelation that there were these studies out there that psychologists had completed in this robust experimental manner that we could take and then apply them to commercial marketing problems. That was absolute revelation. And then for the last 20 years, I've essentially been, going out, learning about this topic, finding more and more ways to apply the thousands of studies out there to the challenges that marketers face. But it was that moment, that got me hooked.
So give us a little bit more of your background. Are you, you have a marketing background? Are you more of an academic? Help people understand.
So I started at marketing agencies. So originally in media agencies. And then when I became interested in behavioral science, I essentially did everything I could to change my job. So that would be what I focused on. So over time, I moved into research and then eventually specialized full-time in behavioral science. Then I wrote 2 books, The Illusion of Choice and The Choice Factory. And it was when I wrote those that companies started to approach me and say, well, look, you've written about these biases. You've talked about how they can be applied. Could you come and apply this to our work? And so I eventually set up a company of my own called Astrotin. And the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with companies like Meta, Google, Mondelez, Sky, all with this single-minded idea of how do you take academic findings from the world of psychology and behavioral science and then through a creative leap, how do you then practically apply them to marketing challenges, whether that's pricing, creative, media?
Outstanding. It's fascinating for me because for folks that are regular listeners to the show, I've had Robert Cialdini on the show twice, and I studied some of his stuff back when I was in college, and I probably studied some of the very same studies, that you're talking about, because some of these studies go back decades, right? And they just haven't been applied necessarily to the world, right?
Centuries might be an exaggeration, but over a century, I think the first what's seen as modern psychology studies really started in the 1890s. So what's that? 135 years ago. That's when Hermann Ebbinghaus was doing some of his studies. So yeah, you've got this very, very rich history. And it's easy to think, well, okay, can we really learn from 20 or 30 or 60 years ago? But generally, these insights are into the fundamentals of human nature. They're not fashions or fads. They are about the key drivers of memory or believability or trust. So what psychologists discovered decades ago tends to still be relevant today.
So to all the marketers that are listening right now, why should they pay attention to behavioral science? I know you work with a lot of big brands. We've got them listening, but we also have smaller businesses as well. Kind of what's the unlock that maybe could be made possible if they pay attention to things like what we're going to be talking about today?
I would say that there are three big reasons why everyone listening should be interested in behavioral science. The first is this topic is relevant. Now, if we're being frank and we distill what our companies are trying to do, what we're trying to do as marketers, whether it's change people's perception of our company's price, get them to switch from a competitor brand, buy more of our products, all of these questions are ones of behavior change. And we're literally, as marketers, in the business of behavior change. So why wouldn't you draw on 130 years of studies into what makes for effective behavior change? Now, this topic is as relevant as it's possible to get for marketing. So that's the first big reason, relevance. But above and beyond that, it's also robust. If you think about an awful lot of marketing theory, it's often based on gut feeling or intuition. Now, that's a very dodgy place to base important decisions. Compare that, though, with behavioral science. Nothing is based on logic or intuition. It's all based on peer-reviewed, observed experiments. So these findings have genuine credibility. So that's the second big thing, robustness. And then the third strength, which doesn't really get talked about enough, is range. It's not that behavioral science is this giant Uber theory that you have to force fit onto your communications. It's a collection of thousands upon thousands of studies. And that variety means that whatever category you're in, whatever sub-area of marketing, there will be a study out there that can help you solve your challenge.
That's powerful stuff. Before we get into some examples here, I would love you just to define exactly what behavioral science is, because there's a lot of terms that a lot of different guests have thrown out there, like neuroscience, and I'm forgetting all the others. But how is behavioral science different maybe than what we've been talking about in the past?
Good question. So I would define it as the study of how people actually behave rather than how they claim to behave. And you're absolutely right. People use a lot of terms interchangeably. So there probably are nuances between behavioral science, behavioral economics, and social psychology, but I think they are used interchangeably. The core thinking is summed up by this brilliant psychologist called Susan Fiske. So she's at Princeton, and she says people are cognitive misers. Now, her colleague, Daniel Kahneman, puts it a bit more wittily. He says, thinking is to humans as swimming is to cats. Now, we can do it, but we'd rather not. What those academics are trying to get to is not to be disparaging about people. They're at Princeton. They know that humans are amazingly capable of a brilliant thought. But they argue that for most of our evolutionary history, energy has been a very precious, a very scarce resource. So we have evolved to preserve energy. And thinking is energy intensive and effortful. So on most occasions, not all occasions, but on most occasions, whether it's personal, professional, or consumer, we don't think about choices in a deliberative, reflective way. We make decisions in a fast, speedy, quick way. And the way we make those speedy decisions is to use rules of thumb. Psychologists have a tendency to be pompous and use unreally complex language. They don't call them rules, they call them heuristics, but these are basically rules of thumb. Like, pick the middle option, pick the most popular option, trust someone who admits a weakness in their argument. These are rules of thumb we have. And the interesting thing to us as marketers is they tend to be prone to biases. So essentially, if you know about behavioral science and you know about these biases, when you design communications, when you design products, you can work with human nature, not against it. So that's what behavioral science is. And hopefully that very brief overview emphasizes this point of relevance.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to me because it's true that generally speaking, we have, and it seems like this is human nature, not just English and American, right? This seems to be cross-cultural, right? We have this limited amount of energy, right? And we make decisions and we behave in certain kinds of ways that are highly predictable. Robert Cialdini calls it the click whirl effect. You know what I mean? And you just basically, when certain kinds of things happen, we have a certain kind of reaction to it. And when you understand these kinds of things as marketers, it can help you presumably be better in all the things that you do. Am I right?
Absolutely. Trying to overturn these biases is, I would say, a fool's errand. It takes an enormous amount of effort to try and break people's existing beliefs. Much better to work with them and twist them to your advantage. You talked about Robert Cialdini. One of his 6 or 7 principles of persuasion is social proof. This idea that if we think something's popular, we at least consider whether it's right for us. It becomes more appealing. We're more likely to pick it. So as a marketer, you can easily use that by stressing how many people use your product. What you don't want to try and do is browbeat your audience into thinking popularity isn't important. That you could spend millions of pounds or millions of dollars and not change an opinion. You work with the human operating system, not against it.
Awesome. Well, this is the perfect setup. We're gonna dig in on a couple of concepts here that you have some great things to say about. Let's start with being memorable. We operate in a world right now which has got a lot of stimuli coming to us, right? I mean, you think about your average human, you've got all your social platforms, you got your text messages, you got your emails, you got the TV, you got the radio, you got people ringing the doorbell, you got the mailbox, you got a million things coming at you in any given day. How do we, as marketers, be a business that is memorable so that when someone's ready, we're the ones that they think of?
So that's a great challenge. There's lots and lots of research out there. Maybe we could cover 2 studies.
Sure.
The first one is a lovely study by Ian Begg, who's at University of Western Ontario. And he runs his study into what he calls concreteness and the power of concreteness back in 1972. Really simple study. Reads out 22-word phrases. And 10 of these phrases are what he calls concrete phrases. These are words that you can visualize, so like square door. The other half of the words are what he calls abstract phrases, intangibles that you can't picture, like a basic fact. Reads the list of words out, then asks the participants to recall as much as they can, write down as many of those words as they can. And he finds that on average, the participants remember 9% of the abstractions, 36% of the concrete words. Mm-hmm. You've got this massive 4-fold variation in memorability. Begg's explanation is that vision's the most powerful of our senses. So if we can visualize a word, and if I say something like square door, normally what happens is it'll just pop up in your mind unbidden. If we can visualize these words, they're sticky. But if they're abstract, there's nothing for us to visualize, therefore they're very forgettable. That is a tactic that most marketers could apply, and most marketers could apply better. If you think about what most marketers want to convey, maybe it's quality or premiumness or trustworthiness. These are abstractions. If you just go out and tell people about those benefits of your product using that language, people will understand it, but 5 minutes later, they'll have forgotten those ideas. What you need to do is translate the abstract objective into concrete language. So, for example, classic one, think about MP3 players.
Mm-hmm.
What most brands did was convey the abstract benefit of memory and storage with abstract language. 128 megabytes. You can't picture a megabyte. You can't picture 126. Very forgettable. Now compare that with Apple iPod. Same abstract objective of memory, but they translated it into concrete visualizable language. 1,000 songs in your pocket. You can picture a pocket. You can imagine a song. Now, exactly the same objective, but by using slightly different language, they applied this benefit or this bias of concreteness and therefore made their messaging much, much more memorable. That idea could be applied far, far more widely.
This is fascinating. I want to explore this a little bit. This concept of abstract concepts are not as memorable. For example, we care about service, right? And concrete things that people can visualize in their brain, like 1,000 songs in your pocket, are more, or a square door, right, are more easy for people to remember by a magnitude of 4 is what you were saying.
Yeah.
So when we think about how we are using our messaging inside of our business and in our marketing, first of all, how do we identify the abstract concepts, and then how do we convert them into something more concrete?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'd state is that 4-fold magnitude different might be an underestimate, because what Begg did was ask people to recall the words straight after reading them out. Now, in marketing, we want people to remember things for far longer. So I reran Begg's study with a colleague called Mike Trahan, who's at Leo Burnett. And we gave people a list of words, but this time we put in a gap. It was only 5 minutes, but it's getting closer to reality. And when we put that gap in, the order of magnitude change between concrete and abstract phrases jumped to almost tenfold. So if anything, 4-fold
is that because the abstract dropped it lower? Is that kind of what it was?
Exactly. Well, both dropped, but I think it was something like 1% of words, abstract words, were remembered. People, as you say, you said earlier on, we've got so much information, we've got so much going on. We're not desperately trying to remember things. It's very hard to stick in people's minds. So 4-fold might even underestimate the power of this bias. What I would do is think about what are the core strengths of your brand or business. Write them down. Well, we want to have good customer service. We want to be seen as competitively priced. And then think to yourself, can I picture that? Can I create a mental image of that? And if you can't, then you need to think about how you can do that. So rather than saying you have good customer service, you might want to think about giving people an example. We always answer the phones within 2 rings. I can picture a phone. Suddenly, that's sticky. So I think identifying, once you know about this bias, identifying the areas where you have a problem is reasonably easy. A little trickier to turn it into a concrete phrase, but certainly doable.
Very cool. There's another scientific effect that we were going to talk about so we can become more memorable.
Yeah.
What is that one?
So the other one, this is probably the oldest experiment we'll talk about. 1933 study by the brilliantly named Hedwig von Restorff. So she was a German psychologist back at the University of Berlin in the 30s. And she ran a classic study, starts like Begg's, reads out a list of words. So a bit of liberty here, but basically she read something along the lines of 10 words, cat, dog, elephant, chair, then goes back to the animals again, giraffe, zebra, lion. Reads out these lists and then later on asks people to recall as much as they can. And what she found was if you read out lists mainly composed of animals with 1 or 2 bits of furniture in, it was the furniture that was memorable. But vice versa, if you read out long lists of furniture just with a couple of animal examples, it was the animals that were memorable. She argued we are hardwired to remember what is distinctive.
Hmm.
Now, that became known as the von Restorff effect or the isolation effect. And that study, 91 years ago, has been run again and again and again, and you get the same findings. So what marketers need to do here is think, what are my category conventions? Write down maybe the 20 conventions for marketing in your category, and then split that list into two. Which conventions are there for a very good reason? Leave those alone. But I bet you that will still leave a dozen or so conventions that are just there for tradition's sake.
When you say conventions, can you define what you mean by that?
Oh, so let's say the convention of a car ad would be to show the product in motion going around a country lane.
I see.
The conventions of perfume ads is to be weirdly surreal and have to have a very expensive celebrity.
Got it.
The convention of bottled water is to show mountains and nature and have a clear bottle that's see-through. Write down which ones there is a really strong reason, but which ones are just there because that's what you've always done. And if you break that second group, the ones that are there just for tradition's sake, you are breaking, you're harnessing one of the most important biases there is, and you are massively boosting the probability that you will be remembered.
So just so I can wrap my head around this, in the world of marketing, we marketers do all sorts of things, right? And we think about online marketers, maybe we have email campaigns and we tend to write the emails in the same way that we always do because we've always done it that way, right? And maybe there's substance inside these messages that is consistent because that's the way that we've always done it. Are you suggesting that we strip out the stuff we've always done and try something new? Is this about trying something new, or is this about something else?
Yeah, so it's slightly different because it's not different from what you as a brand have done. It's thinking, what does my category always do? So let's take the example of bottled water.
Yeah.
9 months ago, you could sit down, all the bottled waters in the country, look at their ads, and you put your hand over the logo and they would be interchangeable. It would all be beautiful people exercising in the countryside.
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, exactly. You can see this is going.
Yeah, right? Then, is that where you're going?
Yeah, liquid death. They say, well, actually, you don't need that. People know water is natural and refreshing. Why don't we stand out by taking a completely different approach? Let's make this about shock and humor. We're going to have, a can that you can't see through. They almost went through every single convention of the bottled water category and crossed the line out. And on a very, very small budget, they supercharged their impact and became far, far more noticeable. So, yeah, if you want to get around probably the most important hurdle of advertising, which is being noticed, breaking conventions is probably the easiest way to do it.
It's fascinating because in the case of Liquid Death, and if people that haven't seen it, it looks like a monster can. So they're modeling a little bit of a different industry that works, right? They've taken the sports can industry, right? And they're applying water to it, right? So they're that's an important thing, right?
That's a very nice way of looking at it. Yeah, you could say they're either an energy, they've taken the norms and behaviors of either an energy drink or a craft beer, and then they've rerun those in water. So that would be a very fertile area for a brainstorm. If you work in finance, maybe think to yourself, what are the norms of a quick service restaurant, a fast food restaurant? How could we apply them in our business? What are the norms of autos? How can we apply them in our business? Yeah, almost taking some of the tropes from other industries and using them on your advertising. That could be a very practical way of applying this point. Love it.
Yeah, because in this particular case, they aren't necessarily reinventing the wheel. They're just reinventing what goes in the can. Really, that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, they aren't reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
They are using a wheel when an industry became obsessed with triangles. I don't know, maybe
exactly.
I've pushed that analogy too far, but
it
wasn't new if they were a craft beer. It wasn't new if they were a energy drink.
Exactly.
But it was radically different in the bottled water area.
Okay, it's one thing to be memorable, and you can be memorable for all the wrong reasons. It's another thing to be trusted. So let's talk a little bit about trust, because there's a lot of distrust going on, because it's very easy for people to spin up products that have no real anything behind it, and all of a sudden become an overnight success with social media. And trustworthiness and trust is a concept that I know there's been some studies behind. So what do we need to understand from that perspective?
Absolutely. And this is a problem I think marketers have faced since time immemorial. Now, if you went back to the olive oil salespeople in a Greek market, they'd have had the same problem. Any potential customer would know that the olive oil salesperson is going to put a positive spin on the truth because their financial well-being depends on selling their product. So consumers have always distrusted marketers and salespeople. But even though that's the environment we find ourselves in, we can apply some findings from behavioral science studies to reduce that trust gap. So one simple tactic is the idea of precision. So the academic in question is Schindler, and he did a study 2006 at Rutgers University, recruits a group of people and shows them ads for deodorant. And there's a picture of the deodorant, there's a little description, and within the description, there's a claim about how much it reduces perspiration. So some people see an ad that says the deodorant reduces perspiration by 50%, crucially a round number. Other people see an ad where the deodorant reduces perspiration by either 47 or 53%, crucially a very precise number. Schindler at Rutgers then questions everyone as to how credible they think the claim is and how accurate they think the claim is. And he sees a 5% boost in credibility and a 10% boost in accuracy amongst the group that have seen the precise claim. Now, his argument for this is, it's one of these heuristics. It's one of these click-whir moments in Cialdini's mind that we've begun to associate precision with accuracy and credibility, because over a long time, people have noticed that those who know what they're talking about tend to talk precisely. Those who are speculating talk in generalities. Now, if someone stopped you in the street and said, Michael, how old's your brother or sister? You would say, okay, she's 39. You'd answer exactly. If someone said, how old is Bob who lives 10 doors down on your street? You'd say, oh, he's in his 60s. You'd give a general answer because you don't really know. And over time, these things become fused. People associate precision with accuracy and truthfulness. They associate generalities with uncertainty. That is a very, very simple thing that marketers can apply. Now, marketers normally say things like, fill in our form, it'll only take 5 minutes. Now, that's a suspiciously round number. You should say it'll only take 6.5 minutes or 4.5. People say we've got 2 million customers. Well, Schindler would argue you should say we've got 1.9 million customers. If you honestly change the numbers on your website and your comms from numbers that you've rounded up to more precise numbers, you will be more trusted and more believed.
This is pretty intriguing and fascinating. And I understand this when I'm dealing with in a sales capacity, like if someone says 99% of customers feel this way, or 100% of customers, I'm going to be skeptical because I'm not going to believe those numbers are too high. But if they say 87.5%, I might feel a little bit more, okay, maybe there's some study there, right? Why is it? Why do you think it is that the more precise seems to make a difference?
Because I think over time, people have, from experience, they generally learn that if you do know what you're talking about, you gravitate towards that precise way of answering. And if you don't, you talk in generalities. And so through consistency of the two things happening together, they get fused until you get a situation like Schindler showed, where exactly the same argument, just shifting the percentages one way or another to move from round to precise, you can benefit from this set of associations.
Interesting. Yep, keep going.
Interesting. You also mentioned, I think you said sales, didn't you?
Yeah.
There is a kind of a separate but related finding around pricing. So there were some lovely lab studies done a while ago by, I think it was Januszewski and you at the University of Florida, but maybe more powerfully, Uber.
By the way, can I just pause and say that you're exercising precision right now by mentioning the names of the study people?
Okay. Well,
are you aware, like, are you cognitively aware of what you're doing? Like by mentioning the actual names, I feel like you're being precise. It's like Schindler at Rutgers instead of saying some professor at Rutgers. Is this another example?
So yes, although now it's become a habit, so I forget I'm doing it. But when I wrote The Illusion of Choice, it wasn't 20 behavioral biases that you can use. It was 16 and a half.
Okay.
And the half chapter is a small chapter on precision. So then I did it knowingly, but you're absolutely right. Probably when I started talking about behavioral science, it was an act.
I now interrupt you. You were going down a path about sales.
Oh, sorry. No. But good interruption. So there was a Uber study, which was very nice, as in the brand, not a large one. They have a team of behavioral scientists and they occasionally comment on some of the studies they've done. And one of them was around surge pricing. And they had randomized people into different groups. So the first headline finding was reasonably well known, which was if I got a surge price for 2x, I was much less likely to take that ride than if you got a surge price for 1.9x. And that's an idea called charm pricing, that you see this kind of step effect of we think of 1.9 as one something, and then we get to 2, there's that very large change. We start thinking of it as 2 something. That backed up a series of very well-known studies. But what was really interesting is they found the slightly more counterintuitive finding that if you saw a surge price for 2.1x, you would be more likely to take that ride than someone that saw a surge price of 2x. So even though the price has gone up, people were more likely to accept it. And the argument here would be, we assume that brands are marking up all their prices. But if we see a suspiciously round price, we assumed it's been marked up a lot. Whereas if we see this very precise price, we assume it's still got some fat in it, but it's gone up in a much smaller increment. So again, it's this amazing study that brands can apply. There's no cost to applying it. But if you're ever in a situation where you're charging $10 or $50 or $100, stick on an extra couple of dollars. You're not only going to make more profit, you'll also boost your conversions, according to you or Uber.
So I'm thinking about this like late fees, right? Instead of a late fee of 10%, you could say it's 10.5% or 11%, right? And maybe they'll be more acceptable. I mean, is that really what we're talking about?
Yeah. Or I'm charging $20 for a current account. Charge $21. People assume that if it's round, it's been marked up in these giant increments. If it's precise, some thought's gone into it. Now, that's something actually that is probably even easier to apply if you are a professional business, you're in professional services, a small business. If you are sending prices out to your clients, do the normal process. I don't know whether your product's worth £100 or £2,000. Once you've got to that rough area, and let's say you've worked out that the rough rate is $2,000, stick on $25. $2,025 will seem better value. And the other great thing is if someone comes back and negotiates, what they tend to do is come back much closer. Because if you say your price is $2,000 and I'm thinking of a counter offer, I'm jumping down in hundreds. I think, well, I'm not going to pay $2,000. I'll pay $1,900, $800, let's say $1,700. Whereas if you've told me your price is $2,025, I'm still working out what I can get away with my counter offer, but I jump down in smaller increments. Okay, I'm not going to pay $20.25, maybe $19.75, maybe, okay, I'll go for $19.25. So yeah, if you're a professional selling to other professionals, that is one of the pricing biases I'd be testing straight away.
So we're talking about trustworthiness, and earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the next thing we're going to be talking about subtly, right? Which is about admitting flaws. So talk to us about the study behind this one.
This is one of my favorite studies. So it's from Elliot Aronson, 1966 study. And he was at Harvard and he came up with an idea called the pratfall effect, which is essentially if you admit a flaw, you become more appealing. So for his study, recruits a colleague, gets the colleague to take part in a quiz, gives the colleague all the answers to the quiz. So the guy does amazingly well, gets 92% of the questions right, wins the quiz by miles, looks like a complete genius. But then as the quiz is coming to a close, the contestant spills a cup of coffee down himself. So supposedly in the 1960s, this might have been termed a pratfall. Aronson has recorded all of this. He takes the recording and then he plays it to listeners. And the twist in the experiment is sometimes he plays the entire incident, great quiz performance and spillage. Other times he edits out the spillage and people only hear the great quiz performance. When he then questions all those listeners as to their feelings for the contestant, there is and I'm now forgetting my exact numbers, I'll have to be a bit round, 50% improvement in appeal ratings when people have heard the spillage as well as the great performance versus just great quiz performance. So he calls this the pratfall effect. And it's the idea that we prefer people or products that exhibit a flaw. Now, I think there's 3 reasons why this is a strong tactic. One, the von Restorff effect. Now, most ads brag. So if you admit a flaw, you're distinctive. Secondly, people believe in trade-offs. So if you pick out the right flaw, you can emphasize your strength. So, for example, Guinness, they don't just pick any old weakness to admit. They say good things come to those who wait, because they know that if they emphasize the slowness of the product, people have a rule of thumb in their head that, well, the more slow something is, the longer it takes, the better quality is. But then the third strength, which is where it's relevant for us, is it boosts believability and trust. If you go out and admit that there's a problem with your product, you have tangibly proved your honesty, and then everything else you say is that bit more believable. So the question here for brands and listeners is to think to themselves, like, what's our core strength? And then is there a mirror weakness that we could admit that might emphasize that strength? So if you are a high-end management consultant, you might want to think, why don't we be more open about the fact that we are more expensive than our competitors? People will notice that message because it's distinctive. When you then tell people about all your other strengths, they'll believe them because you've proven your honesty. And then thirdly, we certainly have a rule of thumb in our head that you get what you pay for. And there's some lovely studies that back up that very specific trade-off. So it's probably not a bias like concreteness or the von Restorff effect or precision that you can use on every campaign. But if you ever get that opportunity, I think it's one of the most powerful biases that marketers can use.
Excuse me. This is fascinating. I'd love to just kind of brainstorm how this might work. And I don't know if you've got some examples, but do you have some examples?
Yeah. So it's not, if you picked up a newspaper, you're unlikely to see a brand using the pratfall effect. So we're not talking about this being commonplace, less than 0.1% of brands probably use it. But if you trawl through the best ever ads, you see it reasonably regularly. One of my favorites isn't very well known in Britain, where I'm from, but I think it's very well known in Canada, is Buckley's. So this is a cough medicine, family-owned brand. Frank Buckley was the founder. 80s, tiny brand, I don't know, 12th or 13th biggest in Canada. They changed their marketing and they adopt the pratfall effect. From now on, their strap line is, it tastes awful and it works. Everything emphasizes the foul taste, and they go to ridiculous lengths to stress the foul taste. One of the bits of copy I love is the largest bottle we sell is 200 milliliters. Anything bigger would be cruel. Now, exactly, this definitely worth Googling. This one, it's been running 20 odd years, and they went from this bit player in the market to market leader. They didn't outspend the competition, they outthought them. And now they sell more than all the big multinationals because they have picked an amazing weakness to admit. It's memorable. It gives them this opportunity for humor. People believe their other claims, and if you admit you're foul tasting, people assume the trade-off is, well, if it tastes that bad, it's got to be pretty potent. It's got to be pretty effective. So that would be one example of a brand really nailing the pratfall effect.
If we think about any kind of business right now, like, I don't know, let's just take a restaurant. To admit a weakness in a restaurant, maybe, for example, maybe you're a high-end restaurant and maybe the weaknesses are that you're very expensive and that it's impossible to get a reservation, right? So we could potentially, I don't know, how could we take that weakness and work that into our marketing?
Well, the impossibility of getting a reservation is an amazing thing, because that starts drifting into other biases. Like, there's an idea called scarcity, which is essentially the idea that we want what we can't have. We want what's in short supply. And there are brilliant studies from people like Stephen Wurtzel at the University of Virginia that show if you give people exactly the same product, so in his case, the original study was cookies. If you give people the cookies in a glass jar with 10 cookies in and they taste them, that group will rate the cookie less than people who get exactly the same batch of cookies, but it's in a glass jar with just 2 in. So same product in a scarce condition, it becomes more desirable.
So like 6 months is worth the wait. That could be their slogan, right? Something along those lines, right?
Absolutely. And it's believable because it's based on the behavior of others. It's not just marketing puffery. There is a delay, and that makes it massively enticing. You can see that tactic being applied again and again at the launch of tech brands. Spotify, Facebook,
a lot of the Google stuff where you have to get on a RSVP list, right?
Exactly. Either it's only people at one university, or you have to be invited. Now, suddenly, if we can't get as much of it we want, we value it more.
Yeah, and that's interesting,
tactic, Michael. I think this might be really commonplace in America. I think I'm not American, so I might be getting it wrong here, but we never do it in Britain, and it's putting limits on the amount of a promotional item you can buy. That's such a good tactic. If you are going to reduce your cans of soup by 25 cents, put maximum you can buy 4 or maximum you can buy 10 cans. Suddenly it shifts people's thought process from, should I buy some soup, to how much soup can I buy? Surely if this shop is not letting me take as much as I want, they must be worried about selling out. They must be worried about hurting their margins. So that would be another application of this principle of scarcity.
Well, this happened during COVID here in the United States. I don't know if it happened over there with toilet paper, right? Like the stores would say limit 2 packs, because the honest truth was that they couldn't make enough toilet paper, and then everybody was trying to, the husband would go in and buy his 2 packs and the wife would come in and buy her 2 packs and the kids would, you don't need that much toilet paper, but everybody wanted it because it was in limited supply, right?
Absolutely. So it was a well-intentioned intervention by the supermarkets, but unfortunately, it was using one of these behavioral biases in the wrong direction. And that unintentional misuse of behavioral biases is quite a common thing. Now, the other one that we see reasonably regularly in Britain, and I think happens in America because Cialdini calls it the government's big mistake, is inadvertently stressing the scale of the thing you don't want to happen. So if you go out and say loads of people waste foods or loads of youths are getting drunk at university, you're using social proof in the wrong direction because you're emphasizing the scale of the antisocial behavior. And according to Cialdini, that removes a sense of transgression and it becomes more likely that behavior will occur. So there are repeated instances of marketers not only not using behavioral science, but sometimes using it in the wrong direction. So that's a definite watch out. Use social proof to emphasize the scale of the thing you want to happen, not the scale of the thing you don't want to happen.
Richard Shotton, the author of The Illusion of Choice. This has been a really fascinating discussion. If people want to find out more about you and your business, where do you want to send them? And if they wanted to connect with you on the socials, because this is the Social Media Marketing Podcast, do you have a preferred place that you would want to connect with them?
Yeah, so on socials, I'm at @rshotton on X and then on LinkedIn. And I just post about marketing and the application of behavioral science. So that might be one place. The 2 books are quite good places to get my ideas and some practical thinking, the illusion of choice and the choice factory. And then the final place, I've just created a self-paced training course. So 7.5 hours of videos broken up into smaller chunks. And that's hosted at a website called Furmint.io. So FURMINT.io. And if people are interested in the self-paced course, if they use the code SME, then there is a 10% discount for any of your listeners.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Richard, for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.